Nigeria has officially floated its currency, the Naira, after years of sticking with a hard peg that spooked investors and drained dollars from the economy. The development means that buyers and sellers of foreign currency in the official forex market are now allowed to quote rates they find comfortable in the market, as against the previous practice where rates were dictated by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The investors and exporters window is now quoting a range of between 750 and 755 Naira to the US dollar, according to customers who cited emails received from their banks. In a related development, Nigeria's inflation rate rose to 22.41% in May, up from 22.22% in April, according to latest inflation data contained in the latest Consumer Price Index CPI report released last Thursday by the National Bureau of Statistics. The CPI measures the rate of change in prices of goods and services. The report stated that the May 2023 inflation rate showed an increase of 0.19 percentage points when compared to the figure for April 2023. On a year-on-year basis, the headline inflation rate was 4.70 percentage points higher compared to the rate recorded in May 2022, which was 17.71 percentage. This shows that the headline inflation rate year-on-year increased in the month of May 2023 when compared to the same month in the preceding year. On a month-on-month basis, the headline inflation rate in May 2023 was 1.94%, which was 0.03 percentage higher than the rate recorded in April 2023, which was 1.91 percentage. This means that in the month of May 2023, on the average, the general price level was 0.03% higher relative to April 2023. Okay, let's leave all those details alone. Therefore, a breakdown of the facts and figures, numbers crunching and all. I'm now being joined by economist, financial analyst, and managing director of Taurus Capital, Dr. Nnaemeka Obiaraeri. Good to have you, Dr. Obiaraeri. Welcome back to this line.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Bati.
Okay, look, let's forget all the figures from the Bureau of Statistics and all of that. Are things getting better or worse? After 3 weeks of President Tinubu's presidency, with what we have seen, with one, the suspension of the CBN governor, two, the decision to float the Naira, otherwise interpreted as harmonization of exchange rates and, allowing the I&E window demand and supply forces, market forces to determine the Naira. And all the other steps that have been taken by the administration in 3 weeks. Inflation now is over 22%. So are we getting better or getting worse in 3 weeks economically?
Dr. Bati, 3 weeks is such a short period of time to evaluate a government that has 48 months life cycle. And but so far, the policy steps that have been taken by the government is something to commend. From the merger of the forex market rates to the removal of fuel subsidy and other policy measures that they put in place is a good pointer that the current government has taken the bold and audacious steps that every Nigerian has always paid for. Yes, we may quarrel with the manner of implementations. We may quarrel that maybe there was no eye for details, but at least the steps have been taken. In fact, the big elephant in the room had been the huge arbitrage rate that have existed between the markets. That's actually what destroyed this economy from 2015 to 2023. If you take a little stroll back to history, between 1993 to 2007, period of 14 years, Naira lost only about 38 Naira to the dollar. The exchange rate in 1993 was about 88 Naira to $1. When Obasanjo handed over power in 2007, at the official rate it was 124 DAS. At the parallel market it was 126. Lost only to 38 Naira. Jonathan came to power 2007. They inherited at that rate. Jonathan handed over a foreign exchange market that had official rate at 197, parallel market rate at 199. Naira lost 78 Naira to $1, which wasn't that bad for 8 years. But look at what happened. From 2015 to 2023, Naira lost a whooping 551 Naira. What happened was that we had a period of bazaar. A lot of arbitrage opportunities existed between the parallel market rate and official rate. And in fact, what led to the first recession that Nigeria encountered in 2016 was the same issue. The government decided to fiddle with the foreign exchange market rate. JP Morgan Chase, Barclays Bank warned us because one of the reasons why Nigerian instruments were listed on their their emerging market index was because there was transparency. But immediately we started fiddling with the foreign exchange market. They yanked us off their emerging market index, and of course that shook the investors' confidence. And between May 2015 to December 2015, over $78 billion left our market. And that was what led to the first recession. Because if you look, there was nothing fundamentally wrong with our economy. As at that time, yes, there was slump in oil prices, but that was not the reason why Nigeria went into recession. So this step that the government has taken is a very good one. What will happen now is that we must take absolute care to make sure that we show up on the supply side. The value of a Naira to any of the convertible currencies is determined by the power of demand and supply. If we can be able to reflect our economy, put in place the security, fiscal and monetary policy measures that can boost investors' confidence to come into Nigeria by word of FDIs and FPIs, and then ramp up productivity locally, in such a way that we'll be able to produce and export. I tell you, within the next 1 year, the Naira and the dollar will settle at around 461. Countries like Vietnam have very low value in terms of their local currency to the dollar. The dong is exchanging to about 23,000 dong to $1. And interestingly, Vietnam, over the last 1 year, they exported over $356 billion worth of goods and services. The value of your currency is not that a problem if you're not a wholly import-dependent economy. If you're an economy that can produce what you consume locally and export, even if your value of your economy, your currency is low, it will even stimulate export because your export will be cheaper. China has a very low currency compared to the US. Even US always complain that China is devaluing their currency to give it unfair competitive advantage. The problem we have here is that we are a wholly an import-dependent and consuming nation. Therefore, apart from this good policy pronouncement, good steps that have been put in place by the current government, we must take measures to ensure that we ramp up productivity locally by putting in place the right security, physical, monetary, socio-economic, and governance framework. And one of the first things we should do to show good faith is to cut cost of governance. One of the reasons why the Naira fell to the dollar was because 60% of the demand on the dollar is corruption-driven. Corruption-driven, if you go to the forex market, towards the end of every month, beginning of next month, once they come back from their FARC and JAC allocation sharing, so much pressure will be on dollar because most of those in the public sector, MDAs, the governors, to be very precise, will begin to use allocations to pursue the dollar.
Okay.
If we can put in place measures to cut cost of governance and stop the corrupt-driven pressure on dollar demand, Nigeria will be okay.
Dr. Obiaraeri, the next question to ask you logically is that what are those measures? Because you've identified the concerns that have been expressed by the pessimists who say productivity is a problem, who say that, look, these policies will not work for as long as Nigeria is import dependent. And you say there are certain policies that can be put in place to address the supply of forex challenge, to break monopoly, to make Nigeria less import dependent, and to enhance productivity.
Exactly.
But we all know that, look, the problem in this country is that when you introduce a policy, give it 2 weeks, some people will circumvent it. They will beat the system. Beating the system, cheating the system is standard practice. How do you prevent those people who are going to beat the system to the game?
Dr. Abati, that is why we clamor for institutional reform. If you bring an angel and put him in charge of Nigeria and the MDAs, and you don't put in place the right institutional reform, the angel will be gamed or pressured to be part of the corrupt system. What is the institutional reform we're talking about here? Dr. Abati, transparency in public governance. Prior to, between 1960 to 1966, we had a fiscal resource control and governance framework that provided for lean cost of governance, that tied the perks of office to part-time level. Today, we have an overbloated cost of governance. Over 2.3 trillion naira are stolen from the budgetary point of view, from the cost of governance. Now, what do? We've advocated this, and that is the right step to take. Public office holders and civil servants at the grade level 14 and above must be made to compulsorily declare their assets and liabilities publicly. An e-portal must be established by the Code of Conduct Bureau where this thing should be done. Transparency and deterrence is one of the ways we can fight corruption. That is number one. Number two, the whistleblowing provisions must be enshrined in the CCB Act. What is the whistleblowing provision? Where every Nigerian partake in fights against corruption. If you blow a whistle that leads to the recovery of stolen goods and monies, you will be entitled 20%. By doing this, every Nigerian will become part of EFCC to help to blow the whistle to recover everything. And when you do it, and when somebody discovers that stealing becomes unattractive, he will not steal. Number three, we know that if you look at most of the recipients of the stolen funds, dollar cash, dollar-related transactions, and properties. If we want to hedge against this, we must amend the relevant laws. For you to register your property, whether as an individual or as a corporate, you must include your tax certification number, your NIN, and your BVN. It's very, very important. So that even those that want to do anticipatory declarations at their CCB form will be very, very careful, even those that want to use form. And now the laws will be amended. In terms of financial crime, the burden to prove the source of your fund, legitimate source of it, should be upon the person who is spending that money. By putting in place these measures, and then security is very, very key. You cannot build on an atmosphere of chaos. We've talked about diversifying the economy. You can only diversify the economy when you put in place security. We've given examples of Netherlands that export over $120 billion worth of goods, agro commodities. We've talked about other countries. If we want to, today we spend over $10 billion importing food commodities. We spent 300 billion naira over the last year importing palm oil. When, as at 1965, we control 5% of that global market. We put in place security, decentralize the security architecture in Nigeria. We used to have regional security and police. We used to have municipal in Nigeria between 60 and 66. We should go back to those things that work. Security is indigenous. When you put security back to the communities, back to the state, back to the local government areas, people can be able to secure them, and we'll have a 24/7 economy. I talked about production. I gave an example. Nike, Puma, and Adidas, their turnover annually combined is almost about $60 billion. But Nike, Puma, and Adidas do not have any manufacturing factory anywhere. They only do contract production from Vietnam to Bangladesh to China. Interestingly, we have some of the best craftsmen in Nigeria, from Aba to Onitsha to Kano. Why have we not in this country put in place industrial belts in every local government area, clusters that provide all the facilities, all the utilities, power, water, that will put together some of these artisans in such a way that they can be competitively productive? What stops us from becoming a contract hub for Nike, for Adidas, for Puma in Aba? That is why we must look at put in place those policies, those measures, those things that will help us to ramp output. But key to it is security.
Okay, but when you put those measures in place, key to it is implementation and doing it in a transparent and accountable manner. But let me ask you something. Inflation, in the introduction, I pointed out, is now 22.41%. Orthodox economic policies, what we discuss every day with Michael Wilson on the morning show. Orthodox economists say, oh, you have to tighten the rates. You have to tighten the rates. Don't follow the Japanese model where interest rate is minus 0.1%. Don't follow the Turkish experience where Turkey is the major center of productivity in Europe. But here in Nigeria, we have a new development whereby President Tinubu has appointed a special advisor on monetary policies. His name is Wale Edun. Oh. Is there a contradiction here? Is Wale Edun going to dictate to the Monetary Policy Committee questions have been raised about the independence of the central bank. I was arguing that with Rotus Odiri on Friday, saying, look, the president can do what he wants, the kind of system we run. So what do you think about monetary policy, Wale Edun's position, and what we need to do about inflation reining it in? Do we go the Turkish way or do we go the Japanese way?
Dr. Abati, every economy is very unique. We have a unique demography in Nigeria. And let's talk about inflation. What is inflation? Inflation happens when there are when there is so much money chasing few goods. You know, when you have supply, when the supply of a particular commodity or service is more in abundance than the money chasing it, rates will come lower. The inflation rate, it will go higher in June, it will go higher in July. Why? Because of the consequence of the removal of fuel subsidy. Prices of goods and commodities have gone high, and you see the report of June and July will be higher than what we have now. But of course, we can rein in this. Okay, back to what you said about Wale Edu's appointment as monetary policy, SA to monetary policy. Let me tell you, one of the problems we had between 2015 to 2023 was the disalignment between the monetary policy side of Nigeria and the fiscal side. You know, and because the fiscal side, we are practically dead to their responsibilities. You saw the CBN overlapping to do most of the things they're not supposed to do, agro funding, interventions, and all those stuff. So I think appointment of Wale Edu is very good because Wale Edu is one of the best investment bankers this country has produced. And I think that role should be maybe like interface between, so that, you know, speaking to the monetary policy managers, the central bank, to ensure that there is an alignment between the fiscal program coming out from the governors, from the federal government, and then what the CBN is trying to do. Because where there is harmony, this economy will do well. And again, like I said, one of the greatest problems we have there is the issue of regulation. In other climes we mentioned, from Turkey to China to America, those that make policies and programs at the public sector do it to enhance productivity of goods and services. But I discovered in Nigeria, regulators and those that make public policy in the private sector, they do it in a way that they will create bottleneck to enable them to extort from here and there. Take, for instance, now the issue of removal of subsidy. When you remove subsidy from any economy, what you do is you allow exit, free exit, and entry of any qualifying investor who wants to play in that market. Remember in 2011, after the National Assembly investigation on the cause of the fraud that they had in terms of the import of petroleum products, they decided you can only import petroleum products when you have your depot. Today in Nigeria, we have over 120 beautifully built depots across the three, even some inland depots. People spent billions of naira investing to build those depots. And they employ, each of them employ not less than 200-300 people. Now, if you say the market has been liberalized, it's free entry, free exit. Allow every depot owner who has access to fund to go out there and bring in product. And let me tell you, people can read the market. If the market is low, somebody can bring in enough volume that can last for 6 months. So what it simply means that when the competition is very, very rife, people will be forced to bring down price. But when you create a oligopoly and then bend the law, bend the rules to allow few people to take advantage and game the system, that is when we'll be in the same pot of problem that we've always had. And that is why we must also, as much as possible, reduce the interface of human beings in some of our activities in Nigeria. If you look at those economies, most of the activities have been digitized. I give an example. The maritime and port sector in Singapore, which is as small as Alimosho, attracts over $25 billion annually. Nigeria, if you put together all the monies made by NIMASA, MPA, and customs, it's not even up to 10% of what Singapore made. Small as Alimosho. And Nigeria actually occupies a very big place to even match what Singapore is doing, serving as a transshipment hub for the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. But we must, as much as possible, digitize operations in those sectors. Okay. As much as possible, reduce the interplay of human beings. Okay. And again, find a way of checkmating our regulators so they don't make laws that enable them to stifle the system and then extort from real private sector operators who are creating value.
Okay. Dr. Obiaraeri, you mentioned oligopoly. Do we have an oligopoly in Nigeria? Would that oligopoly survive under the present regime?
In Nigeria, I'll give you an example. We have several oligopoly.
Yeah, but specifically in the oil and gas sector.
In the oil and gas sector, NNPC has been the oligopoly in terms of importing the PMS, and even some of the products that have been deregulated. Now going forward, I think this the current president has this strong political will. He's not like the former one. This one has a strong political will, and with the kind of people that he surrounded himself with, I don't think he will allow this system to be gamed and manipulated. Like I said, if you say a system is transparent, a system has been regulated, let there be level playing ground for anybody. The other day I heard that I read over the newspapers that they licensed 3 firms to import PMS. That is madness. If you say you've regulated the market, every depot owner must be able to import the petroleum product. Do you know that in the downstream oil and gas sector, there are different roles you can decide to play? Somebody may decide, I want to just be a refinery, to do refinery and refine petroleum products. Somebody may say, okay, I just want to do storage. Somebody may say, okay, I just want to distribute, own trucks and logistics. Somebody may say, oh, I just want to do filling stations. So you must allow level playing ground for everybody. As long as the person meets the underlying criteria to bring it, and I can tell you, you can even allow more people to come in. Look at the GSM. Before the advent of GSM, before Obasanjo liberalized that market, one minister even told us, was it David Mark, that telephone is not meant for the poor. Today, even the poorest woman in the village has access to the internet, has access to the phone. Today, we have almost about internet penetration of 114 million. So, in every sector of the economy, from agri, from textiles, from oil and gas, upstream, midstream, downstream, we must allow transparency to reign. We must allow free entry and exit. And we must ensure that the regulators do not pander to the whims and caprices of few privileged people near the corridors of power.
Okay, let me ask you this question, which is the big elephant in the room. Godwin Emefiele was suspended. He's been arrested by the DSS and detained. He has spent about 7 days in detention. What will you say about his legacy and the attempt or the move against him by President Tinubu?
Like I said, the greatest problem we had between 2015 to 2023 was there was a huge mismatch, disalignment between the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. And of course, central bank, for whatever reason, deviated from its role to begin to play the role of the fiscal managers, began to do interventions in agri and other sectors, even the RT 200. What I expect under the new administration is for the fiscal managers to be alive to their responsibilities, from the federal government to the state governments and to the local government. In fact, the National Economic NEC should meet as often as possible. Like I said, if the fiscal managers were alive to their duties, there will be no encroachment from the monetary policy end of the market. It was the encroachment of the monetary policy, overstepping their bounds, that brought us to where we are today. And like I said, we must also allow the independence of the Central Bank of Nigeria. It's very, very important. Take, for instance, the oil and gas sector. Look at how Petronas is operating. Look at how Petrobras is operating. Look at how the Aramco is operating. Have you bothered to ask yourself, in the period of oil boom over the last 18 months, others are declaring bumper profits. Nigeria is the only oil producing country that is distressed because we allowed overregulation. We allowed very few people in the course of power in Abuja to become overlords.
No, I wanted you to comment on Emefiele.
To be precise, I said what has happened is that, like I said, APC against APC, every one of them from the same party. You know, it's very unfortunate. All of them have been there for the past 8 years. Nigeria is a country where we must ensure that the right things are done. Law must be obeyed, and law must let everything that we let it be transparent. Like Falana said, nobody is above the law, but let the law be seen to have been done transparently.
Okay, one other thing. Tinubu's Economic Policy Advisory Committee, Cardoso and Co., they've advised him on a number of measures. They say, for example, that certain bodies of government should be merged, customs with NAMASA, with other revenue-generating agencies, so as to create a single revenue-generating channel. But we also know that since the days of President Jonathan, we had what they call the single treasury account, which President Buhari sustained. Do you see any contradiction here? Do you think that the Economic Policy Advisory Council is offering good advice? They are even saying that government assets should be sold to defray the federal government's debt obligations. What do you think?
I align with their recommendations 100%. 100%. Let me tell you.
They should sell our assets?
In fact, if we had allowed the sale of those refineries in 2007, Dr. Bati, we wouldn't be where we are today. See, let me tell you, I say it with every sense of responsibility. Obasanjo is one man that saw what many of us are seeing now. He was the first person that opened up the public sector, privatized and sold off most of the properties that the civil servants were using to be siphoning monies from government. If those refinery sales were allowed to have happened in 2007, we wouldn't be able to say. From that 2007 till now, we've lost over 16 trillion naira to inefficiency. I ask, when they said NLC, TUC, Pengas, and we are going to go on strike, and I asked myself this question. These are people who are managing those refineries. For 8 years, we were wasting 1.120 billion every year, reported losses. And I asked myself, if any of them have owned those refineries, who will employ people to work in a refinery for 8 years, refining nothing, and every year you will earn 67 billion naira? Those assets should be sold. Those refineries should, in fact, Tinubu should sell those refineries within the next 3 months. It should be sold. In fact, the other assets from the jetties to the inland depots, even to depots in most of everything, should be totally privatized. Let me tell you what will happen. If you privatize those refineries, they still have infrastructure in place. Deep private investors will buy it and collocate new refineries there. And those refineries should not be sold to existing refinery owners. They should look for other oil and gas players, those that own depots, and sell it to them. And then the margin of NIMASA, the margin of customs should be done. Like I said it, customs should be digitized. We talked about subsidy. Are you aware, Dr. Bati, that we've lost over 10 trillion naira on waivers and tariffs because customs, the way they are structured, is public sector controlled? Go to America and see how the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol works. We must align with those recommendations. Some of these assets should be sold off. Allow efficiency to creep in. LMA petrochemical plant was sold. It was practically dead. Today, LMA is doing trend 2. NAFCON was sold to Notore. Today, Notore is doing so well. So we must not allow. And I give example again. Rail in Nigeria for 8 years we are clapping. We built 156-kilometer rail. Ethiopia and Djibouti did 759-kilometer rail network in 7 years. At an average cost that is twice less than what we did. Do you know that if we allow and liberalize most of those sectors, states like Lagos, Ogun, Ondo, Edo, Delta, Anambra, Imo, and Rivers, and Abia can decide to do a rail corridor under a PPP framework? We've done the number. It will cost about $8.7 billion to do. And we've looked at the volume of cargo and the passenger that goes through that lane. In 30 years, 40 years concession, you will see investors taking over that route. The Lagos to Shagamu, to Ore, to Ijebu-Ode, to Benin, to Asaba, to Onitsha, to Owerri, to Port Harcourt, circle back to Umuahia, to Aba, back to Okigwe, to Asaba. This line is the most lucrative route in Nigeria. If we open up that space and allow private sector investors to come in, I tell you that in 10 years, we will do nothing less than 5,000 kilometer new rail network in Nigeria. Nigeria is one country that ticks all the demographics to become great. But the problem we have is that we have people who are not creative thinkers in place of power and authority in our MDAs.
Okay, one final thing by way of caveat. The interventions by the CBN, they are not just the CBN's or the MPC's interventions. The Bankers Committee was also part of it. Do you have any blame to share to the Bankers Committee? Because all these bank MDs, bank CEOs, when there is this kind of situation where the CBN is being questioned, they just stay aloof because they want to do their business. Do you say that the Bankers Committee is also guilty as charged?
Dr. Bati, with all due respect, the relationship between Central Bank of Nigeria and deposit money banks in Nigeria today is like that of an overlord with subservient servants. And the same thing in every sector, from oil and gas and all those stuff. Like I said, we must put in place institutional reforms. We must put in place institutional structures that reduces human interface in our transactions. We make the law, make the regulators less, to become less controlling. What we have in Nigeria, we have built a quasi-unitary system of government or system where those in place of authority in the public sector behave as if they are overlords. Like I said to everybody who cares to listen, when people are complaining, oh, civil servants or minimum wage of 30,000, removal of, I say it. Now in Nigeria today, everybody is an accomplice. There is no victim in Nigeria because we are all allowed the processes that is not working to stay. If we allow less interface of human beings, if we allow the regulators to do their job without putting in place bottlenecks that will shut down the private sector investors and players, this country will do well. So CBN on its own, just like any other regulator, NNPC and whatever, they are overlords compared to those in the private sector. So the bankers committee, as much as possible, should not be held responsible. And I also let you know this. Look at other economies. Look at the UK. Look at America. How does the FSA function in relation to the other financial institutions compared to what's obtainable here in Nigeria? And it's because we have very weak system. We must put in place solid institutional reforms that will enable this country to work transparently. Anything that enhances accountability and transparency makes the system to work. Once the process is rigged and corrupt, nothing good will come out of it.
Okay, well, on that note, I'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Obiaraeri, for agreeing to be on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show today.